starting off, um, how much do you know about FON?
You mean
My
the
project,
project in
Courses
its
2.
entirety?
Yeah.
Honestly, not really anything at all. I didn't. I'm gonna end up doing a review video on some of the projects that I'm in, where I look at a certain number of uh, prerequisites that I'll take a look at for certain scopes on each of the projects. So it's usually like 10 or 11 pieces of criteria that I go off of, and it's more so just kind of looking at the framework of groups themselves. I'll probably do that maybe this upcoming week, and that'll obviously take me to where I can look around a little bit more, but usually not anything kind of in depth unless I'm doing some kind of a like a deep dive uh, video or research on the project. So again, as far as particulars, kind of what the goals are, and really anything, I haven't read up on. So
All right. Yeah, I did. I'm going to be upfront. I'm not too knowledge about you specifically. I knew that you were a person in the community and you used to be a big ROK person, but then moved to Call of Dragon. About the extent of my knowledge would be that you used to be like a big reviewer for projects at one point.
yeah,
Somebody in somebody in chat said that you mentioned us in a video and um, they were being a little bit defensive about it, but I decided to check it out. And like I said before, it's certainly something that I'll change because you do have a point.
no, I got you. Yeah, I mean, a part of my, a part of my content when I was, and bear in mind, I wasn't doing any kind of overwhelming content in rock when I initially started. Really, the only reason I even got into doing content in rock was because this was back when I was running jump projects and doing my own. I mainly did it so the projects that I was running had references and resources. And one of the first videos I did for rock was basically a walkthrough jumper guide that pretty much walks you through everything. Again, at that time and kind of appropriate for that time when I was doing it, and it would just be a full walkthrough on literally everything you needed to know from beginning to end, because there just really wasn't anything out there like that, from any of the
Yeah,
big.
okay, that guy sucks ass.
Well, well, to be fair, I haven't read that one, but I would imagine it would probably have to be a pretty long article in order for it to really, kind of do a new player justice. But more so when it comes to the other CCs, whether it's the Chizguls, the Shinshis, the Geckos, the Dragothians, etc. That for any of them, right, that may have made a jumper guide, typically it's kind of like a highlight. It's a TLDR, really, for the most part, and it doesn't really go into kind of a full breakdown and really full details.
Yeah,
Kind of
it doesn't
glosses
go step
over
by step. You
exactly.
know, it doesn't tell you, okay, this is your first step. Now that you've got this done, you want to start doing this so you can eventually do another thing later down the road. So,
Yeah, more or less, and so there's just, like I said, for me that was the initial reason on why I started producing some content in rock, was because there just wasn't anything like that. even someone like Logic Bank, I think, has done some stuff, but again, not to the detail and not to the kind of outline and way to present it, where it really gives, where you're looking at a brand new player,
Yeah.
and being able to kind of walk, kind of handhold them right throughout the process, while being as concise as possible. So, for me, that was mainly the reason that I initially got into it, and then eventually I started doing project reviews for a period of time that I was doing. I was actually working with Raya, who was the old Jumper community server owner. She was the one who initially started it, and I had actually, and she had reached out to me a couple times, and we kind of collaborated a little bit where she'd ask me for my thoughts or advice in certain areas before. I think before Z-Man now. I don't know if you're in that community. I would assume so, but
Oh, yeah. I am.
before Z-Man took it over, after Raya ended up transferring ownership. So, but yeah.
To give you a bit of context, since you are unaware of FON, it's the official sponsored project of Jumper Community.
Okay, cool. I think I saw an announcement or something.
Yeah.
I still read those whenever they post them. So,
They've put a few announcements on it, but it's basically just it's the JC Jumper project basically because like obviously the staff members have done their own projects before, but this one is like an official one. JC is officially supporting it,
hmm
stuff like that. So,
yeah.
um, it's a bit of special in that way, and we've certainly gotten some criticism of people saying that, oh, it's biased, stuff like that. But
Yeah.
you're always going to get those people that cry about that. I'm not too worried about those people, but Z-Man is one of the main R5s, if you um, did not notice. He's one of the main R5s, but I am the king. I don't exactly like saying that, but I'm going to be the main leader inside. I'm the one that's really like spearheading the project as a whole because my reasoning for this project is jumper projects nowadays they're just bad. A vast majority of projects are just bad now or subpar at best. And I want to change. I want to create a project that doesn't have the fundamental flaws that all projects do. Still working on it, obviously. But I want to create the pinnacle of jumper projects. So when anyone asks, what is a good project? We just have to point to FON and say, hey, this is what you should be striving for your project.
Hmm.
Um, and eventually down the line, after this project is successful and my kingdom is successful and I make sure it runs without me, um, I will set my sights on creating a central hub for all jumper projects for ROK. Because right now, it's split apart, basically, between JC, ROK Kingdom. I can't remember the name of the third one. And Feldabaoth, which is like a Russian one.
Okay.
But,
Are you referring to Discord servers
yeah,
specifically? Okay.
Discord community servers. Um, JC is definitely the largest one, but stuff like ROK Kingdom is a lot more like engaging and active.
Hmm.
But once I have that and I have the credibility from FON being successful, I want to create a central authority, essentially. And in this central authority, there would be a judgment. Basically, kind of what like you were doing, but on a much more grander and official scale. And my goal with that is when I judge a project to be bad and not worth joining, I'm hoping that the average casual player or just any player will not join that project, not waste their time and waste their money on that project. But when I approve of a project, it will make those people want to join that. And putting that accountability and just that system in place, I'm hoping it will force project leaders to actually innovate and get better. And the overall quality of jumper projects as a whole will go up. So less people will be wasting their time in. There's always going to be bad ones, but I'm just hoping to bring that average up above 50% at the very least. But that's a pie in the sky idea right now, because nobody knows who I am, really.
Gotcha. No, I mean, I think it's lofty ambitions, and I know when which I think for the most part, I think generally speaking, are in a good place or come from a good place, and I know when I was doing project reviews at a time, I think the biggest challenge, like with anything, is just one, getting exposure and being able to spread that awareness, right, to get to enough people. And, for me, at my size, I was very small. So, I think my views were probably like, 4 to 600, 4 to 700 on average, when I was kind of doing it every 2 to 4 weeks at a time, probably at the shortest intervals for when I was putting review content out. And, I even went as far as making a series. I have, like, if you join my Discord, I have a rock jumper education section. That's what I call it. I've had it up for years, and I basically I made step-by-step video guides on how to build a project, how to decide if you want to run a project, all the steps basically on how to build it, how to structure it, how to build your Discord out, how to recruit, everything. Essentially all the way up until landing in Final Kingdom, or wherever your landing spot's going to be. But I had this whole series out. I mean, I have stuff on. Respectfully, I probably have the best guide out there on how to actually be a lead, on how to be a leader of an alliance, on how to be an officer of an alliance, on how to be a contributing member, on how to be a territory manager, obviously for the parts that are still relevant today, pending any recent major changes to any.
Everything stands away with time.
Yeah, but things like the alliance guide, the officer, the contributing member, those are things that are for the most part going to be pretty intact. I don't know things like diplomacy, things like recruiting, things like being like a war officer, etc. Like those types of things are going to kind of still stand the test of time, because it's pretty universal, unless they change a lot of fundamental things in the game, which I don't believe they have. At least that would pertain to the particular advice that one would be giving on those particular areas, and just kind of how to go about doing a position like that. But I essentially created all these things that I have on my channel. I have it on that section that anyone can go and read up on. And it's funny because I love coming back every once in a while just to see where the standard is, because I mean, and I always tell people this respectfully, like I've just never seen I've never seen as well ran of a project as when I was doing projects. And I did 5 projects in Rock. I did, I think, 3. God, I have to remember my numbers now. I did 3 in Infinity Kingdom because that's where I went to after Rock, and then I've done 1 so far in Call of the Dragons. I have another one that's ongoing right now that'll probably start up in a couple months whenever they finally introduce Home Kingdoms. But it's. I mean, I've reviewed probably hundreds of projects. In the past couple years, just in that span. It's hard. It kind of goes to a point you were making before. There's no. It's not like there's a way to get certified, so to speak, right? There's no class or schooling or course or program that you have to go through in order to, you know, get some kind of stamp of approval on
Yeah.
running a project. I mean, this applies to being a leader. It applies to being an officer in Game 2 as well. There's nothing really out there, right? I mean, there's guides and, like ones I've made and I'm sure others have too. But, anyone from a 12-year-old to a 67-year-old to a man, a woman, have various backgrounds, cultures, beliefs, etc., can decide, right, if they make an account and in a new kingdom and they want to be a leader and their alliance could grow to be successful, and the way that they run it can either be similar or vary, to others, to their peers that are in that kingdom, and they can rule well or rule poorly. And more or less the same thing can be done with projects too. It's just, yeah. I mean, it's kind of is what it is. But in that sense, it does kind of suck because the people who decide to run projects, from my experience, usually the majority of them, I would argue 99% of all projects, just don't really understand like what I believe is the most important thing, which is that you're accountable and responsible for the people that are choosing to join your project versus another, and trying to create the best day-to-day experience that you can for the players that are there. Where you are a steward to those people there in your care,
Yeah.
and
If
so.
if I bring in an R4, I hire them as an R4, and they cause trouble, whatever it may be. Um, that is my fault because I gave them that position of power to cause trouble. Sure, I didn't do the action that they did, but I still gave them that position, that authority to commit this. Technically, the average ROK player has some understanding on how an alliance works simply because they've seen it so much. Because, I'll see even like top 20 alliances in kingdoms, they'll have different positions. They'll have an R4 for territory, an R4 for events. They'll have a Diplo R4. Do they do their job well? Probably not, but at least they understand it.
Sorry.
Hmm?
Oh, I'm sorry. What was the last part you were saying?
It said I would think most of the ROK player base does at least understand the core roles of what's needed in an alliance. The very basics. Event
Uh,
R4, Diplo R4, territory person, to an extent.
yeah. I mean, I,
But
I don't know if I go as
there's
far as saying the
always,
majority. I would go as far as saying the people who, take time to do the research and vet. You'd probably be surprised, um, how many, if you go in and you look at new kingdoms and how many people are running alliances that don't, have, any kind of consistent or just foundational roles that are set up for their alliance. And even projects. I mean, you'd like to assume, right, that projects would probably have a higher chance of doing it, and having those things that are set in stone. But even some,
Well, a lot of projects are just people who either A couldn't keep up in whatever kingdom that they joined, or B they got removed from their officer position and they were just like, yeah, fuck the R5s, I can do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then they learned that it's it's a lot of work. Because this project has taken up a vast majority of my free time in the past month or so.
Yeah, no, man, that's the that's the darn truth, especially when you're in a situation where you're founding a project. And I mean, I remember sometimes putting in 8, 12, 14-hour days, on and off, of course, but being generally available throughout that window, 5, 6,
Yeah.
sometimes 7 days a week, and it's a lot. I mean, obviously over the years of running multiple projects now, you find ways to multitask, to mitigate, to be a little bit more efficient here and there. Where you don't necessarily have to put as much kind of action time in, where you're specifically doing something, and you kind of set things up ahead of time, and it allows for you to be a little bit more reactionary, which saves time overall that you're putting in, or having to actively dedicate.
Yeah.
But it is still a lot.
I like to follow the philosophy that if you're a leader and you're sitting in a room with everybody that follows you, if you are the smartest person in that room, you failed as a leader. Because a great leader surrounds himself with those that are smarter than him. And I'm really trying to follow that um, with my project. I'm trying to find quality over quantity, being rather selective with my R4s.
Gotcha.
But really, the main point that I wanted to get you in here is I, just like you gave that perspective on the announcements, which something that I didn't really think about and I've kind of overlooked because I've put my focus, elsewhere on other things. But, brought up a great point. It's likely going to be the most checked channel by just the casual people that don't really chat or not going to until like close to the jump period. Because, we're going to be jumping in all the way in June, so it's still got a little while. So, definitely going to change that, but I really wanted to get your opinions on other aspects of the project. Because I did this with 12-inch. I got and sat down in a meeting with him
Mm.
because, well, the main
Does
reason,
12-inch run projects?
no.
Okay. I
Uh,
I wasn't sure. I've never seen him do one. At least again for the time when I was in rock. Maybe that's changed over the past 2 years or
no,
so, if he has done any.
he still doesn't like for projects.
Oh.
I would say this is going to sound bad when saying it, but I think his ego's just big. Because he mentioned that somebody offered him $10,000 for him to join their project, play in it, and he said he denied it.
Hmm.
I don't know about you, but it don't matter. That'd be the easiest 10 grand of my life, but
He's great. Maybe. I mean, I definitely have heard. Uh, I don't know I don't know if I'd say wild, wild or wilder, but I definitely have heard other things that are somewhat similar, similar to that. So,
I don't know if it was actually real. No, it's just something that he said in the meeting. But
uh,
basically, I want to create um, completely like unique and handcrafted guides for our project specifically. Because, like I said, the ROK.guide guides just suck. They're severely outdated by several years, and they kind of just have blatant wrong information. So we wanted to create a completely new one that we made. And also we wanted to capitalize on that and put our own branding on those guides and release those guides out to the public as, you know, the best guides around, essentially. Because it'd be killing two birds with one stone. It'd be getting our name out there while also giving up-to-date education to the ROK community,
yeah.
hopefully at least. So, but I brought 12-inch in there because, at least to me, he does know what he's talking about as far as ROK knowledge goes. So I wanted him to be like a consultant for guides. We give him the guide, he looks it over, checks it, you know, says, no, this is wrong, and then, you know, we correct it. Something like that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get your opinions on stuff because you're a different perspective. Honestly, completely outside of. You're just an outside person, in my eyes at least. So you would have a different view than most people. And given your background with creating projects and stuff, you would probably have a deeper insight than most people. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think respectfully, when it comes to, when it comes to running projects and, building them from the ground up and, doing as many as I have of, kind of varying sizes, I mean, every project I've ran was always considered to be more of a mega project. So it was never, typically average rock projects are usually 2 to 4 alliances, somewhere within that wheelhouse typically. And, I never ran a project that was less than 6 alliances going in, for, pretty important reasons. And, my approach is obviously arguably pretty different compared to, I would argue the majority of projects as well, given that, usually projects are wanting to, on average, be smaller, more condensed, so that way they can, kind of funnel fighters and active and strong players into a fewer alliances compared to more, and it's kind of more internal focused rather than it is kind of external. It's more, hey, this is us and our project, instead of, kind of looking at the entirety of the kingdom, right, as a first priority. That usually is not the case, and in the majority of projects, if not all projects I've ever seen, and that I've been privy to and have experienced. But and I think the difference is that I'll just be honest and upfront. I mean, I've basically done everything that you can do, at least when it comes to diversifying different types of projects. And, I've had my own fair shares of, of great projects and projects that didn't end up going, the way that we hoped it would. And, whether that's from, rogue whales to betrayals to,
alliances migrating in from other kingdoms within the same continent to basically fight, against our group. I mean, anything and everything you could probably think of. I've experienced, shockingly enough, in my short time. So, yeah, I guess to your point, I very much value, what I not only value, but I believe in what I can offer, and how I can help and advise in areas. But which is one of the reasons why I really enjoyed doing the review videos when I was doing them once upon a time. But yeah, I mean, as far as I think as far as the project, your project itself goes, I really would have to kind of like look at all the channels and and really get everything down. Let me see here.
I could explain you at least an overhead at the moment, if you'd like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm looking right now. Yeah, because I mean, the way to, I mean, this is the thing, right? Is that even though an explanation would be great, like the way that you have to look at building a project is that you have to look at it like if someone came in new that didn't know anything about the game, if they could come in and understand your project, right, from just reviewing a couple channels. That's one of the reasons why, like, when I build my project Discords out, as I kind of showed as an example on the video, you notice I don't have a lot of channels, right? I do that on purpose because usually you're always going to have typically a higher amount of newer players that are going to be interested in joining. I should say with an asterisk, as long as you're doing active recruitment. And with that, if you are doing active recruitment, you should always have, more newer players compared to vets, right, that are interested in re-rolling, with some of the exceptions of, like, unless you have a whole kingdom, right, or you have multiple alliances that want to re-roll, right, which has happened before that I've seen for some projects. But like if I log in and I look at your rules page. I mean, honestly,
that is something that we are working on.
Yeah,
doing.
And this is the thing. Like, I would say, like, as always, like, when you say stuff like we're working on, to me that's an automatic red flag, because before you start recruiting for a project, just like before you start selling a product as a business, you don't open up shop and then tell the customer, oh, sorry, we're still working on getting a grill in so we can actually make food to serve you, right? You have everything ready to go before you start. And to me, when I go in and I review projects, if you don't have these just baseline minimum, like, we're talking about minimum things, right? These are not complicated things that you have to do to get to, like, step 10. These are step 1 basics. And if I go in and I look at projects and they don't have, like, to me, that's just a red flag, right? Why are you promoting your project if you're not ready to go in all the areas that are important that you need? So if we go down this one by one, right? If I look at your rules page, this is okay. I would personally like this to be formatted a little bit more, just because it comes off as, once again, kind of a wall of text, right? Like, I have a rules page on my channel, and wherever it is, that one of my guys did for me. And it's just very simple, right? Like, you see that there's, like, if you look at my rules page on my channel, you'll see there's different sections, but there's, like, hyphens that do breaking. There's some sentences here and there if an explanation is needed. But it's just formatted a little bit more appropriately, at least to something that I like. And there's obviously different ways that people can format however they would like to. But when I look at the rules page, like, it's okay. It's just, I think part of it almost feels like it's too much spacing, right? Like, you could break this up into maybe 2 different sections, add, like, a plus sign or some kind of a symbol, right? Just to kind of, indent the line, if you will. Like I said, nothing, this isn't awful. It's just, again, if it was me, I would format, like, it just feels a little lazy, right? It's like, hey, we'll just copy paste. It almost feels like this was copy pasted, and then we just did the whatever that special symbol is that puts it in this code. If I look at the Alliance information screen, honestly, I feel like it's a little bit too busy. Like you just like if I look at the top one here where it says volcano, and you just got all this symbols and squiggly lines and stuff like that, you know. And I'm okay if people want to use like some icons and things like that, but you know sometimes simple, you know, sometimes less is more, right? As they say, because the other thing you have to also consider is that if you're running, let me see here, you have 3 alliances, you know, like
three mains.
Yeah, 3 mains.
Academy.
The thing to consider is why are you going to make people scroll, right? You have to think of it like that. If you can fit everything onto one page, if they're viewing it on a mobile device or if they're viewing it on a laptop or a PC, why are you going to make extra work? Why are you trying to make their fingers scroll down more, right? When you could fit everything just kind of in one viewing page. So, like, that's how I think about it, right? Because you could condense all this onto one page for the 3 alliances you have, like into one section where I don't have to scroll.
I know how well, at least I would know how to go about doing that on PC, but how would you condense it enough to fit on mobile?
Well, what I just mean is that if you condense it, it will also reduce the amount of overall scrolling you'd have to do on mobile, right? Like for me, when I do it, I typically am doing my edits on my desktop. You know, you could still do your edits on your mobile device as well, but it's always thinking about how can I reduce everything? How can I reduce the amount? How can I be as concise as possible, right? By condensing, so that way it's more efficient, it's more effective for the average viewer who's going to go and read it. And so, like, if I'm looking at this page, like, I just think having all these bubbles here, you know, having the thing that says Alliance roles, I mean, to be honest, that's redundant to me because you have the channel that says Alliance information. So why do you need a line that says Alliance roles, right? It's essentially saying the same thing. And then, you know, again, it's kind of like tightening, you know, those things up as well. I mean, you have like co-lead, let me see, diplomacy territory, warlord recruitment events, AOO, you have data, audit FlexR4. Yeah, I mean, I guess this is okay. I mean, if you really wanted to shorten it, you could just have the line read officers, right? And then you could have, like, you could put in quotations at the end, or like as after each person's name, right? So you would do like their name, and then you do space quotations, and you say like co-lead diplo right? You could do it that way if you want everything to kind of be on a line. I'm not against things being split like this if you're kind of indenting to the next line, but I think it would look a little bit cleaner to me. But again, that would be my thing there. If I'm looking at your project vision and goals channel as an example, on here, I don't know why we have the strike through the words. I just feel like I don't know. It just feels like it's being a little extra to me.
It's a design choice.
Yeah. Again, to each their own. But so we have 2,000 plus members. You have 3 main alliances, 1 primary war, 1 secondary war alliance, 1 open field, and then you have 3 academy alliances with very hands-on coaching and high activity. You could just say with hands-on coaching and high activity. I don't know. I probably not a need to put the word very in there. I mean, I get where you're getting at, but the line itself, I think, you know, says what it needs to say and does itself its justice. Let me see. Our goal is to become a shining example of what all future jumper projects should strive to become. Have unique events and systems in place that have never been done before successfully in any other project. I mean, let me see. To have a very active and interactive Discord. A server pre-jump and after jump, we want an actual community. Okay, completely free and robust account coach system to ensure all players have an equal chance to be great. To build a unified kingdom that our players can take pride in. Okay. a lot of those lines just sound very vague, right? Like they're very broad in general. They don't really dive into anything specific. For example, like you would have in an ad, right? Like an ad should almost be like an example of a goal, right? Like if I was going to do an example of a goal in my project would be, we want to land one alliance in each zone one, right? So we can work on establishing a line of communication and giving ourselves flexibility. So that way, if we need to leave, or if we need to, transfer players here to another zone, or go and assist, when a pass opens, we have that opportunity to do so. Also allows for us to kind of maintain a heartbeat to increase our odds of being successful. Like I would condense something like that. I would say as a goal, like for MGEs, right? We're going to do, we'll do 2 fixed, we'll do 2 free-for-alls, or we'll do 2 fixed, and then the next 2 semi, right? Like that would be more of a specific goal.
Speaking on MGEs, we're actually going to let all MGEs be free for all up until SOC.
Yeah, but for me that's like something, and that's great if you already have an idea on that. Like that's something I would put in the goals section, just because like that's your goals for what you want the kingdom to be seen as, right? Like how many alliances do you want in Zone 3? Who's going to run? Are you guys going to do rotations on LT? Are you going to do a king alliance or not? How many people are going to be able to touch LT? How are you going to, handle migration, right? Is a goal, because another goal is, hey, anyone who joins our project, right? If you're still with us and you're a contributing member, our attempts will be to prioritize those players being able to migrate their main accounts in, right? If they'd like, and we'll take note of that. Like that can be a goal. Sometimes being a little bit more specific with the goal, just so, and again, maybe you have it on a different channel. I'd obviously would have to get there, but I think those things are really important because it allows for you to really set yourself truly apart from other projects that respectfully, use similar wording like this. Like if you go in and you look at other projects, right, you'll notice that it's usually a lot of kind of broad and vagueness. It's not too often that it's incredibly specific outside of hey, this is how many alliances you want, right? This is how many players we want. We want to win, all the KVKs, right? We want to be able to give the best experience to players. Like, I mean, that's great and all, right? And that's always nice to have on like a one line somewhere. But sometimes being specific in what you're looking to do and build is, in my opinion, I just think incredibly important. When we get to your vision, where it says, I guess the other thing here is that you say you want 2,000 plus members. You say you want 2,000 plus members, but you're going to have 6, but you'd have up to 6 alliances in total with the 3 mains and 3 academies. Is that right?
Yeah, we are going to be putting plans in place to have temporary like sub alliances because there's always going to be an influx of people. But the 2,000 member goal is more of a Discord goal rather than an ROK goal.
Okay. I mean, I think something like that's important to differentiate, especially if you're going to list that on the goals, because anyone who reads this would automatically think, okay, we're going to have 2,000 plus people that are going to come with us to the kingdom. Like, that's how I read that.
Fair.
Yeah. Now, if you say something such as, we'd like to hit, our Discord goal for people that have joined is 2,000, and we hope to convert as many of those people over that decide to jump with us as possible. And because of that, we're only going to start by setting up 6 alliances, 3 and 3. But if we need to expand on that, then we will, right? That clarifies a little bit more while also not kind of pinning you down, right, and committing you to one thing or another. If we go over to your vision, where we say, okay, ultimately we want to change the entire Jumper community as a whole. We want to reshape it into something greater. We're leading the charge into a new area of Jumper projects, a true golden age, because let's face it, most Jumper projects are subpar, to say the least. Most of them being trash or having the same fundamental flaws that keep repeating, and most of them failing by KVK2. This point almost sounds kind of petty, and negative. There's no reason to say trash. There's no reason to say that they're failing. I think your vision is more of like, what are you striving? Like, what do you want your project to particularly be, and be able to stand for, right, in the kingdom. An example of this would be, you could say, whereas we usually see, like, I'll give an example of how I would do mine, right? It would be, whereas we usually see on average, or where we usually see projects averaging between 2 and 4 alliances, where we differ is wanting to, have as many alliances as possible, because we want to be able to, get as many players into our alliances that are starting out in the kingdom, so we have an opportunity to cultivate that new player experience. And because we also focus on things like power balancing alliances, we're not going to have one alliance that's stronger than another. In doing so, this will increase player participation, because no one's going to feel like they need to jump to a higher placed alliance, right? Because everyone's basically along the same power. And on top of that, it'll also increase competitive rivalries within the kingdom. We'll get a lot more engagement and a lot more social interaction out of it because of that. And our goal is to create an environment where players can develop at the fastest unimpeded rate possible. And like something like that, right, to an extent. If you want to mention something about, events and, building a community, like that to me would be a little bit more of what I'd consider a vision, because you do want to include some specifics, right, into what you're standing for, where you don't want it to kind of be too generalized. But yeah, like when I read this line, it just comes off negative. Like, do you see that or no?
It certainly was kind of more my own beliefs projecting.
Yeah. And again, you can believe, you can think, and have your own feelings and opinions on things. But if I'm a new player joining this, and for the first time, and I read something like that, a part of how some of them may take that, and you could even make the same argument for returning players or vets, and they come in, they're like, man, this guy's just talking trash on other projects. Like, for example, what if some people join your project and they've been in projects before that were well ran, right? And even though, yeah, you say the least most of them being trash, right? They might not hone in on least most of them, right? They may hone in on, this guy's just calling them trash and saying that, they're failing, by KVK2. It's not uplifting, right? It's a vision should be more optimistic, right? It should be more positively charged, and not necessarily kind of like taking jabs at other things, if that makes sense. But yeah, again, if I read this, I would be turned off by the time I got to the second part. If we go to the next line,
taking jabs shouldn't be visible to the average glancers.
Sorry.
Stuff like the negative thing, it shouldn't be on like surface level at all.
Sorry. Sorry. Are you asking?
Yeah, like what I'm getting from it is, that you shouldn't include anything negative in it at all, because it's a surface level thing. It's going to be the thing that what the average player is going to see. The people who don't dive like deep into a project, they're going to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I just, my view on when I'm writing things up is I think it's always good to be neutral or positively charged, right? And when we're writing something up, and for what I've seen, it always is more of a benefit than it can eventually become a liability down the road. Because when you're writing things up, you also have to think about, you're going to have some people that will really read everything, and some people are just going to skim. And then you'll have some people that probably don't read,
At all.
either read it all or they'll only read a little bit. And
Yeah, those are the people that ask, "Oh, when are we jumping?"
oh,
Even though
100%,
it's in there.
all the time.
It's in the ad
Yeah.
that we're jumping in on June 7th, and they're just, when we jumping.
Yeah, no, all the time.
Fine.
And I'll tell you, like when people ask me that, the very first thing I tell them is, I tell them, hey, thank you so much for asking. This is where you can find that information. And and I usually when people ask me that, I never tell them straight up. I'll say, hey, this is where you can go find that information. If you're genuinely interested and wanting to be a part of our project, right, this is where you can go and find it. And when you word things like that, it instead of it looking as though, oh, hey, this guy's being an a-hole because he doesn't want to answer, right, he could just give me he could just give me the answer right now. Instead, you're putting more of the onus on them, right, where you're basically saying, okay, well, hey, if you really believe in this and you really want to be here, first off, you should be doing your homework to compare if this project is the right fit for you versus another. But then you're also setting a good example publicly by holding them accountable. And that's something that I've seen, that I do firsthand, and at least from what I've seen based on my experience, I think works out very well, because it also you also can look at it as a way to kind of weed out, right, the people who are really want to be here, right, versus those that don't. And if they take offense to something like that, then honestly, it's probably better that they've left than if they stayed.
Yeah, there's definitely people who I just plain don't want in my project.
Yep.
Even if they would be an active player, if they're going to cause drama and be toxic, like I just don't want them.
Yeah. The challenge with something like that is, unless you have history, right, with those people, it can be very difficult to anticipate and predict if and when that can happen. I can tell you, I've had people that I've interviewed and vetted for leadership positions, for officer positions, and the application looks good. Voice interviews I did with them, went well. Even some of the players I did background checks on, where I would go into the kingdom I would go into the kingdoms they told me they played in, the positions they had, and I would ask people. I'd go and I would message like the top, like all the active alliance leaders and the officers, and say, hey, do you remember this person? Because they would also tell me what their name was when they played there, and I would ask them, and I would just say, hey, do you remember? Do you have any experiences with this individual? If so, were they good or bad? And I would say, I'm doing a jump. They're interested in becoming a lead, and just wanted to kind of hear from some people that might have played with them for a while. And you'd be shocked at some of the responses you get from that. From my experience, it was pretty much 50-50. Half the time I heard, oh, hey, these people were great. The other half of the time it was like, no, these people were awful. And that can sometimes be the difference between whether or not you bring those people on or not. But then in the same breath, what happens when people have a great application, they do a great interview, they're giving you all the right signs, all the good signs, right, that you're hoping for. You bring them on, and then the crazy comes out later. And that's not in anyone's control, right? I would never put that on the lead. I would never put that on anyone. I would put that on the individual whose crazy came out, that decided to join a project they didn't believe in. Like that's on them. That's not on anyone else. And so,
Yeah.
it kind of goes back to one of the things you said earlier, right? Where, you were saying like, you feel like it's, you would feel like it's your fault if, someone came into the project and, you recruited them and they did something poorly. I think there's a little gray area there, because it also depends on, what's your vetting process like? How do you go through your application process depending on the individual roles that you're recruiting for? And, as long as you're doing everything, I would say in a good way, in a good professional manner, and those things spring up, like I tell people, like that's not in anyone's control. Like I tell people I can't see the future. I don't know if someone's truly here with good intentions or they're not. All I can do is go off the percentages, and if it
So far, all of the people that I have recruited into my alliance, except for 2 people, I only trust them based off of their skills and knowledge that they have displayed.
Mhm.
But I do not trust them on a personal level. I trust them enough to be an R4 for my alliance, but I haven't built that personal trust with them like I have for the other 2. The other 2 are people that I had played a previous kingdom with, and I played with them for several months. I got to know them personally. I know how they act.
Yeah. And stuff like that is great because, and I can tell you as well, like, my, some of my most enjoyable projects that I ran were actually, when I ran like my second, my third, my fourth project in Rock, because after you run your first project, like and it kind of sucks to say this, but it makes a lot of sense in reality, is that if you run a project, right, and obviously you hope for, like, if it's your very first one, right, you of course always hope for the best in every project you do, because I think most people would like to just be able to do one project and that's it, right, just have it be successful, don't have to worry about doing another one because it's a lot of work. But in saying that, one of the things I started to realize is that you can basically you can almost use your first project, or any project for that matter, as a way to kind of filter out the good and the bad leads, the good and the bad officers. And then if a project, for example, ends up not going in the direction that you hope for, and let's say some time passes, you run, you do another project, or if you do one right away, if
You can
if the
invite-
exactly if the leads are the officers that you feel good about because you've spent time with them and you've been able to see, what are their actions, how do they speak,
how they react to certain situations.
exactly, yeah, everything, right, you're basically able to kind of almost you're almost kind of auditing them, right, and assessing them in real time throughout the duration that you're in the kingdom. You can almost use that as a way to say, okay, well, hey, I'd love to run it back, but this time, I'd love for you to be a lead, this other person and this other person, right? Because I think we all worked really well together. You guys obviously really believed in the project. You believed in what the goals are. You believed in what the foundations were for it. And now it's just a matter of us trying to find, 1, 2, 3, 4, however many more leads, but because we already have more of a core group, right, now your percentage chances to be successful are a lot higher, because now you have people that are backing you up, right, or backing up the project, because they really believe in it, again, through their words and through their actions, which, again, I mean, it sucks to kind of say that, but at the end of the day, like, that's something that I found where I did that. And after if a project went south, for any number of reasons, I could look at that project after reflecting and looking at kind of the pros and cons, and how can we make improvements the next time around, but also looking at the management pool and saying, oh well, this lead did really well, this officer handled themselves really well, and you're kind of using that as almost
this person did really well this role, so I want them again in the same role.
Yeah.
Because I know I can leave them alone, and I won't have to even worry about that because I know it'll be done.
Yeah.
And I did use that because my current co-R5 Torian, like I said, I had played a different game with him. It was Age of Titan. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I remember.
But I was in the very first kingdom with him, and the guy's a savant when it comes to gift flow and war strategy. He far outclasses my expertise when it comes to those topics. So, when I was doing this project, after a little bit, and a little bit of thinking, I just said, you know what? Let's hit him back up. I asked him if he wanted to join. Yeah. Now he's our head of war. He's my own personal Diplo. Um, he's just kind of going to be one of those people where I won't have to worry about. Like, I know he's going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And he's also one of those people that I can pass King off to at any time, and I won't have to worry at all.
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
that's great if you have someone that can kind of help you manage that load. You know,
Yeah.
at in that kind of and I guess like an R6's position, and at least when it pertains to kind of a king queen, but just having someone you can rotate with, and I think the important part is being able to build up a
I don't, as the quote unquote R6, I not only have to care about Volcano, I have to care about Earthquake, I have to care about Avalanche, I have to care about the Academy, anything. I have to poke my head,
yeah.
everything.
Yeah, and I mean, my
And even if
recommendation
it's-
in those cases is that you shouldn't lead an alliance. So if you want my honest, and this is what I tell people earnestly, like if you're trying to run a project and you're, and your view for how you look at it is that you want to be there to support all the alliances, all the leads, all the officers, all the players, my number one recommendation to people is that you need to not lead your own alliance because you're not going to have enough time or you're going to overwork yourself too much. So like when I do projects now, and I learned this after I did my first project, right? I immediately realized that trying to be a lead and trying to support everyone else, which is burning out, you're burning it at both ends essentially. And so when I did my second project, and this is how I've done it every time since, I never lead an alliance. Like I'll play, obviously, and I'll have an active account, and I'll play within the alliance. But as an R6, I basically just oversee, and it allows for me to actually do the job more efficiently because then I can go and hop between alliances, right? So I can kind of assess how alliances are doing. So I'll go hang out in one alliance for a week. I'll move and go to another alliance for another week, right? And it allows for you to also pay attention to what's happening in the alliance chats. You actually get a better hand on the pulse, right? Because one of the things that you may eventually hear, if you haven't already heard this before, is you might have a lead come to you and they'll say, well, this is this is what's happening in our alliance, right? This is the stuff we're dealing with, right? These are the conversations we're having in our chat. But if you detach yourself from running an alliance and you really have this kind of kingdom-wide approach or group-wide approach on how you're aiming to want to support what you'd like to do in a supportive role, you really have to make an effort to basically go around and interact and integrate yourself with as many alliances as possible. Now, whether it's a week or if it's 2 weeks or if it's a couple days, however much. Like this is something I learned over a period of time, and it's helped me out tremendously. So again, if I was to give you like one really, really like pro tip, it would be if you're aiming to look to support the group as a whole, don't lead an alliance. Have someone else do it. And then you basically step into like more of an R6 role and focus a lot more on kind of supporting and managing. Because think about think about how much time you're already putting in right now just as a lead, and then basically just take all that away, and then you can reinvest up to all of it or less in doing more of the holistic, more of the macro, right? The big picture, managing and supporting. So if that makes sense, but again, if you haven't done that before, I will tell you with an absolute level of certainty that you'll quickly come to that same realization, especially if you're, like I said, if one of your main goals is to truly support the group, all the alliances, all the leads, all the officers, all the players, in that kind of capacity, you'll quickly realize or come to your own realization that leading an alliance is just not the best move.
I suppose that does make sense. In previous kingdoms that I did, where I was king, because technically I've been king twice, 3 times if you count the sub, but I subbed in for like a month, so it doesn't really count, in my opinion. I was essentially running 3 different alliances. And that was kind of a fault of my own because I didn't delegate tasks.
Yeah.
And eventually the R5s of those alliances became too reliant on me. They would always ask me, what's the next step, instead of making the next step themselves.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that I don't want to do because back then, I didn't have a job. And all.
Gotcha.
But now, I do have a full-time job. And I don't quite know how. I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to put in a lot of time while also keeping up with my job. That's some logistics that I definitely would just have to sit down and think about. But you do have a point because at this stage, a vast majority of the work that I've done has been to the project itself. And other than recruiting the R4s for Volcano, I really haven't focused on Volcano that much. But I could always just use the excuse of we have a lot of time before the project start.
Yeah.
I don't, because you make a good point, but I don't know if I would want to do something like that. Because to a degree, I am going to support, but I still think I would want to be a lead just for my own pride, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's I think it just
Even
comes down to
if
one of those
it-
things where it's like, we can't have our cake and eat it too. Right?
Yeah.
It's
illogical.
it's just too much time. That's all it is. I mean, I think anyone who has ran any form of a successful and probably more importantly sustainable alliance for a period of time knows how much work it is. Obviously, depending on how much they delegate, depending on how much support they have, right? Are they, do they run a rotational R5? Do they have more than 8 officers? Do they run 2 or 3 shifts? I mean, obviously, it can get complex, or it can go deeper, I should say. Than some of just the kind of standard operating alliances. But for the most part, how much delegation, how much appropriate managing are you applying that is going to allow for you to free up some of your time? Regardless, just being a lead in general is going to soak up a lot of time. So, for anyone that tries to be a lead and to basically run the project, I just think it's absolutely hilarious. Because, again, I ran into the same thing in my first one, and the moment that I immediately realized how big of a mistake that was, not in the sense of that, because even for me, like when I did it on my second, third, fourth, fifth project, I wanted to lead because, I always felt, I think like most people do, right? Like if you want to lead, the hope is, well, I don't know if I'd say everyone, but I would say a portion of people that want to lead hopefully believe that they can do things better, right, than previous experiences that they've had in other alliances where other people were leading. But I think more than that, when when you kind of take on more of this R6 position that I started calling it, at least for my projects, is that you start realizing that you can actually help and support the alliance as a whole, the management team as a whole for that alliance, the lead more for that for particular alliance, and for all alliances a lot more in that type of position than you ever could, trying to do both. And then you kind of get into that that rising tide lifts all boats mentality and approach for how you start seeing things that are happening. But it's rough. It's actually one of what I would argue is one of the biggest and fastest like red flag burnouts that I see happening in projects. Is that you have, I mean, it's different if the project is just one alliance, right? Because you don't have anyone else you have to look out for. You don't have anyone else you have to consider as far as that you have to coordinate with, communicate with, etc. But the moment you start getting into like that 2+, really more like once it gets to 3 and more, but I would still argue to a degree 2 and more alliances, that's where you start seeing a lot more of the kind of burnout that just creeps up on people. And it's also one of the biggest reasons on why founders or leads will quit, or they'll scale back activity, they'll bring on a rotational R5, right, and then maybe some can stick through it. But I think you have to also be able to appropriately self-analyze and self-assess your own situation. How much time do you have available? Like, again, compared to someone who works from home, they probably have a lot more time available compared to someone who has to go somewhere, right? Are you in a position where you can be on your phone often throughout the day or not? That's also going to play a huge impact. So, those are things that people have to look at as well, is, how is your lifestyle right now and how much time can you put in? I mean, unless you're just, the godfather of micromanagement, time management, multitasking, and you just have like a lot of automated things that are set up where people just kind of already know what to do, or you have programs or bots that are helping out, just as an example, that are helping so that way you don't have to kind of put in a lot of that manual active time, then yeah, that's great. And I'm sure there's some people out there that fit into that, but I often lean more towards the majority is not right set up to do that when they're going in to run their own projects. So I mean, again, to me, there's always a lot to think about and a lot to consider. But yeah, I mean, again, if I was to kind of leave you with what I consider to be, probably my number one pro tip on running a project, it's really figuring out what's more important. Is leading the alliance more important? And if it is, okay, then find someone, right, that can kind of manage things across the board, especially if you just don't have time to. Or is the project as a whole more important to succeed, right? Because keep in mind, everything you've said to me so far is that you're looking at the future. You're looking beyond this project, which means that you're looking beyond this alliance. So everything you're telling me already fits into more of an R6 position than it actually does you being an R5, So to me, it's a no-brainer. Like, you've already given me the answer for what I would already say, okay, this is what you need to do, right? If you want to be able to do those things. On top of that, would also allow for you to have more free time to work on and invest in those other areas.
It kind of sucks to listen to a person when they're right, but you don't want them to say the stuff, but it's right.
Thanks. I have that effect on people. in obviously the best of ways, I hope, and in the most sincere and kindest ways. I think, some of the, like a lot of friends I have, I can't remember what that saying is, but a lot of my friends I have are ones that will just be direct. They'll just be upfront and honest, and you don't have to be a dick about it. You can say things in a nice or a neutral, if not nice way, and still get the same point across. Right? It kind of just all kind of comes down to your soft skills, which is one of the big things I often talk about when it comes to people that are leading alliances or projects, and just how big of an impact just being good and having good soft skills is. But yeah, I mean, I think it's more important for people just to be, not unfiltered, but just honest with people. And
I don't really like the sugarcoat method.
Yeah.
Like when it's not required, because obviously you want to sugarcoat things when you're recruiting migrants, when you're doing Diplo stuff. You want to sugarcoat it then, but normal talk, like a council discussion or something like that, you don't want to sugarcoat anything. You want to just tell it how it is, tell what's going on, what the issues are.
Yeah.
You don't want to dance around it, or if it's an issue, you don't want to say, well, it's not really that big, it's kind of a small thing. No, you just want to say, this is an issue that we're having, we need to solve it,
Yeah. Better just to cut right through the cake sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, let it marinate, and I think one way or another, depending on when you guys finally get to your stage of starting, depending on what you've chosen, you'll most likely know at that point, what any of the potential consequences or kind of pinned areas are that you'll need to look out for, when it comes to what you end up deciding that you want to do. But again, man, sometimes just, thinking on it, getting a good night's sleep, coming back at it the next day, maybe even, meet with some of the other leads, meet with some of your other co-leads that you have, and say, hey, this is what I'm potentially thinking now. What do you guys think about this? Sometimes collaborating with other people that are in the project, that can also help.
Yeah, I definitely was going to talk to them about any of the stuff that was said here, because I'm not going to make a sweeping decision without talking.
Yeah. And no, I mean, I think it's a good idea.
Man, why can't we just recruit you into the project?
Well, I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, it's funny, I at one point I was offering services. Like, this is after I was kind of wrapping up the my jumping project career, if you want to call it that, or I'll just say my adventure saga. And I built out this services portfolio, and I was reaching out to leads, and I just said, hey, look, I'll come in and walk your group through and give you like an in-person session, and kind of like a TED Talk, something, etc., something like that, just to give an example. And I'd go in and I'd talk about, right? So I'd come in and speak on, how to recruit, or I'd speak on how to do Diplo or Territory or Warlord, or hey, this is how you set up your Discord, or I would come in and do an audit. Like, I had services for coming in and doing like an audit. Like, I'll audit your entire project, and I'll walk through it with you and your team. I'll record it. I'll give you the recording so you have it, so you can reply, replay it and do it on playback. And all these things that I thought would be great, right? Kind of along the same lines of what you were saying earlier, right? About wanting to vet projects and then say, okay, hey, look, I'll give you the stamp of approval or not, etc. Right? But that was kind of my thought was, I'll tackle this in real time while it's going. And after I did all that and I reached out to a bunch of people, bear in mind, I didn't stick with it too long, and I didn't market and promote it too much. But I just started realizing that there's really wasn't anyone that was interested. Again, for my limited pool of people that I reached out to, I let them know about it, and then I just started thinking to myself, about the videos I had done before and that I had put out there, and I even worked with Raya at one point on the Jumper Community Discord back when there was, probably like 2,000 plus people there, and we set this thing up, right, where it was basically like she was going to promote it on the Discord. I said, hey, look, I'll come in and I'll do a class, right? I'll do like a jumper project class for leads, like for anyone who wants to start a project, for anyone who wants to know what to look out for, on things that I would say are like red flags, like, hey, this is good that these projects have those. And I'll do a session. I'll talk about these things and I'll answer questions and I'll do a Q&A, right? And we did it once. And bear in mind, this was a while ago, of course. But when I did it, I think we ended up having like 10 or 20 people that turned out to it. And obviously, even though it was very small for the amount of people that showed up, it was great for the people that were there. The people that showed up were very engaged. They were asking a lot of questions. And I think what's funny is that people started asking more questions and getting more engaged the longer that I talked for. Because after I was able to like really explain things and dive more into things, and it wasn't just, oh yeah, who's this person, right? Who's this rando that's just coming in and gonna talk about jumping? It started to obviously become a better overall experience as time went on, and it was fun. It was great to do.
Yeah, they started to trust your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, if they do or don't, that's fine. I for me, I think the most important thing was, if there was something that they had a question on or something that I saw or I heard, that that could be given some guidance or just an outside perspective or just another perspective, I would always be happy to give that, because to me, I just felt like, okay, well, if I can even just help one person out in how to approach a particular situation, right, that can have its own ripple effects. That can help out that group, that can help out all the players that are there, that are trusting this person who's running a project to do what they need to. But yeah, I think the thing with jump projects is it's very similar to people that decide to become leads in the game, is that if you have a bad experience in a jump project, worst case you uninstall the game and you stop playing. Best case is that, and I'm talking like in ones where you have a bad experience, best case you will either keep playing the account in that kingdom that you're in, because maybe you spent money or you feel like you put a lot of time in, you just don't want to lose that, or you'll do a restart, right, and then you'll go into another project. But the challenge is that the arguable success rate, if you want to call it that, and it obviously depends on how you define success, but I think projects that are able to last a few KVKs, especially if you make it out of season 1, I think that's obviously like your biggest hurdle initially. If you can make it out of your season 1 and make it out of your first KVK, pretty much wholly intact, or the majority of your projects intact, I think that is, probably the biggest milestone that you can get to. Because those are basically your two biggest hurdles, is your home kingdom and then your first KVK going into your second season at that point. And so, but it's hard because you don't know. Like, you don't know all the projects. Like, how many projects that you go into have an area where they promote or they're transparent, I'll say that, about, how many projects have they ran, how did those projects go, how did they do in KVKs, etc. Right? Like, how many project leads basically will post their resume and their project running history? I mean, almost none.
I haven't seen that
Yeah.
at all.
And what's funny,
I mean, I've certainly failed before. I've made mistakes in the past.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the whole reason why I'm here right now is because, I failed before, so I'm trying again.
Yeah. Yeah,
Trying to do better now.
and for me on my project, I have that. So like I have a resume on my project where I tell people, here's all the kingdoms I did projects in for each game I played, and I have a video reference. I have like a little bit of information on what happened in the kingdom, but I typically have a video that I made, right, that basically summarized and concluded how that project went. And all that's public. So people can see everything.
Or they could go back to, like, let's say you did a video on your project's KVK1, they could see, in quote-unquote real time,
Yeah.
what happened in that KVK, how you reacted to it, or what you did, or whatever.
Yeah. No, exactly. And for me, I always felt like it was very important to be transparent in that regard. And I often get people that when if they're joining an active project that I'm doing, they'll tell me and they'll say, "Man, I really appreciate," they're like, "Man, like that's really humbling of you to put that up there," because they tell me the same thing that I kind of have already known for a while, which is that almost no one does that. And for a period of time, I was working with Raya on kind of this beta idea, this pilot idea that I had, which was basically where I was building this spreadsheet out, and I still have it, where I was tracking all the jump projects that were being promoted and going through Jumper Community. So like everyone that went through there, I would join the project, I would grab whoever the founder was, right? I get the Discord and their ID as well. I would do the leader IDs, and then just a couple small bits and pieces of information, right, on the projects, and then like a starting date, and then I would check in on the projects, right, like once a month, or something like that, right? Or I would read the announcements if I can get access to those channels, and then I would basically, depending on what happened at the end of season 1. Right, I would write down my notes on like, okay, this is what happened at the end of season 1. This is what happened at the end of their first KVK/season 2, and then we'd mark, okay, this project lasted until then. Right, we'd kind of say, okay, this project was successful, lasted up to KVK 2. Right, and they're still ongoing, based on whatever the last date checked was. And like that was something that I was starting to build out at one point, because I just thought that information was incredibly beneficial, right? It kind of goes back into the thing you were mentioning in the beginning about being able to kind of give that stamp of approval, if you will, that sign off to, okay, well, this project's good to join, right? This one maybe not so much, but just kind of doing it in a different way. And then basically what I was going to do with the sheet is I was going to make it public. So I would update it in real time. Anyone and everyone could view it, and Jumper Community would just pin it somewhere, right? So that way, if players were coming in, or if leads or officers were coming in, they would be able to open the sheet up. They could do like a Control F or search for someone's name and say, okay, because like, for example, maybe they joined a project and, they're like, oh, this name is really familiar, or maybe the voice is familiar, or the profile picture is familiar. Maybe they changed their name, right? Because that happens too as well. Not that everyone does it, but some people will. Where they'll try and change their Discord identity, can't change their voice, right? Unless they're going to voice mask for the entirety of their future up until that point. But you'll have people that'll do that, or they'll just make a brand new account and start playing on that because maybe they kind of, maybe they feel like their past is being carried with them. And I've seen that happen a number of times. But yeah, anyways, that was kind of the idea behind doing this spreadsheet, this public spreadsheet.
It would hold those people accountable.
Yeah, exactly.
And it would
that was the hope.
It would force them to improve and fix their mistakes.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean that was the hope.
It would make any mistakes that they make actually have consequences.
Yeah, I think the thing is that if you're going to do something like that, as it pertains to projects, you have to. Obviously you have to have enough, I don't want to say enough pull, but you have to have enough presence, right? Like you have to have, like you basically would have to be like the size of Jumper Community, and you'd have to go around, auditing, but you have to know what you're looking for, right? Like I can't tell you how many people I've come across that that have told me, oh yeah, I know how to build the best project, and I can go in and look at your project and tell you if it's good or bad within a minute, right? And most of those, if not all of those people, I probably wouldn't trust with that assessment, probably as far as I could probably throw them. And that's not to say they're bad people at all. It's just, for people that I've conversated and discussed with, and maybe there are some other people out there. I'm not trying to put myself in my own unique box, because I'm sure maybe there are some people that are out there that can do those, kind of earnest assessments of objective assessments of projects, and be able to really break things down, explain things well, and then be able to say, okay, yeah, this project is good, this project's not, so to speak, or not to say that, maybe not to say it's not good, but to say that, hey, this project needs some work before we would sign you off, right? Because anyone who's running a project can always make improvements to a project, right? Just because the current state of the project, may not be up to par, doesn't mean that they can't just go back to the drawing board or go back and just work on that, right, and build that up. Because really that's just a framework at that point for a Discord server. The other part that is really important is, where is that individual? Like that, the actual founder, right? Or the founders of a project. Where are they at mentally? How much knowledge and experience do they have? Not only in the game, but more so even just when it comes to managing humans, right? Is really what it is at the end of the day. If you're breaking it down, that's one of the reasons why I always loved when people on their applications would tell me like they worked customer service in retail, because if you've ever done retail customer service, it's very much customer facing of a job. It's you are customer support essentially, right? You are, even to a lesser degree, you kind of play like a human resources type of role, a customer interaction role. So you quickly, in that type of a role, for people that obviously have been in those positions for a while, you quickly learn how to talk to a variety of different customers, men, women, different ages, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, etc. And you can often develop your soft skills in that type of an environment, from arguably a pretty young age. So I always loved when people would write that down, because to me, and obviously you can kind of see if you ever get into voice calls with those people that have had customer service jobs for a while, you may often find that a decent amount of them, have a particularly active way that they go about communicating with other human beings. And it usually would come off in kind of what I was saying before, right, where it's kind of more neutral, or it's more positively engaged in how they're conversating with people, just because that's an environment that subjected them to that atmosphere day in and day out every time they logged in or clocked in for their shift. So
you can't tell a customer that they're being stupid or whatever, because might lose your job.
Yeah. And I mean, even just the way that you deliver information, right, kind of has to be tailor-made to that particular customer, right? You might tell one customer, like you might have two customers where you have to tell them the same bad news, right? Or, sorry, we don't have this item in stock. But you may deliver that news in two different ways. If you've
done that,
if you've had customers that, depending on how they come off,
I've done that.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, it goes back to what I was saying about having soft skills, and how that's, to me, I really believe soft skills is arguably either the number one or the number two most important thing that, leads and officers and project founders just sadly severely lack. Not to say everyone does, but in my experience, I often find that the majority of people severely lack that, and that will severely impact how a project's performance and success rate when it comes to percentages will play out, once they start. So
you think I severely lack that?
Well, I mean, I don't know if we've talked long enough, for me to be able to, say that on that end of the spectrum, one way or the other. I think even with the I haven't read enough, on the Discord as well to be able to say that one way or another. I will say that from what we've discussed so far, I would say it's more often than not that it appears to me that you do think about what you're going to say before you say it. And there's times where I've noticed that you may catch yourself kind of mid-sentence with, maybe trying to find, a better phrase or a better way of wording, or kind of inserting this there to, complete
To
the
get
thought,
my
or
point across.
yeah, or to complete the sentence, as an example. So, I think, those can always be good starting points, and they're good building blocks too as well. And, bear in mind, even if you were someone that didn't have any of that, you could still, work on those things and train yourself up to that point. I think everyone has that capability. It's just a matter of, how consistent are you going to be with putting in the effort, and then trying to remember to do those things right in real time as often as much as you can.
This might come off as a little bit wiping my own ego, but I personally think that um, I would be above like the average leader simply because I did do this voice call with. I saw that you know, quote unquote, critique my project, and I reached out to you. I wanted to know more and get more feedback from you. Because ultimately, um, anything that you say, I am going to consider and think about. It isn't a guarantee that I'll do everything that you suggest or say that should happen. I never get to see that. But I think all feedback, even if I disagree with it, should be at least considered because it's a different perspective from my own. I mean, when I brought my co-lead Torian into the project, he shared his perspective, and a lot of things changed about the project when I brought him. Because, we talked about the project, I talked about what I wanted, and he's just like, well, why don't you do this? Like, the whole MGE thing being free-for-all up until SOC was his idea. Then after explaining why he wants it, it made a lot of sense.
Yeah. No, I mean, I
certainly given me a lot to think about.
yeah. No, I mean, I wasn't expecting this to be talking for a little over an hour and a half now, but yeah, I mean, to me, these kinds of conversations are always great. I think anytime you're able to, sit down and have a discussion with, any amount, right, of like-minded individuals, especially when you're talking about, topics that anyone involved or participating is familiar with. And, when it comes to the kind of grand topic of, running, managing projects, it's definitely one that I very much enjoy and relish in being able to just discuss with people, especially people that, care enough to want to sit down and talk about it.
Yeah. Because a lot of project leaders would have just basically said, "Oh yeah, fuck that boss nasty guy, bro. He doesn't know what he's talking about," and just completely dismiss what you said.
Oh, no, without a doubt. I mean, I've had a number of them that basically took that exact same stance, and what's funny is that some of those people that have taken those stances have actually come back to me and apologized and said, no, boss, you were actually right in what you said, and I experienced this or this and this happened, and you would advise me to, you would recommend doing this or that. And I've had some, not all, but I have had some that
They're
have.
just like, damn, that Boss Nasty guy was right. What he said came to fruition. Fucking Oracle.
Oracle. I don't know if I go that far. I just think I think at the end of the day, right, it goes back to what I was saying before, right? And this is the last thing I'll say because I do have to get off and get to bed before my lady comes down and hands me divorce papers. Is that in my experience, because of the amount of projects I've ran and because of the size and the scale that they were ran at, some of my largest projects, I said before, but in rock, I never did a project that was less than 6 alliances. And for the most part, that's pretty unheard of. Like, that's not common. And 2 of my largest projects I did, we had 15 alliances going in.
15.
And then we had 12 alliances in my second. And, people, it's funny because people will hear that and they'll just immediately think like, dear God, how did you do that? Like, that's just too much. I would never do that. That's not going to work. And for people that were there in those projects or who watched, my video content when I was covering those projects, or at least for the ones that I did, would effortlessly find out like how amazingly fun those kingdoms were and how well things actually went and how much potential those kingdoms had. It's just, a lot of it just comes down to, how well can you scale? And, obviously depending on how many alliances that you want, but yeah, no, it's always interesting, when I hear from people that, I've even had situations where, I've had people that I've had leads in some of my projects that just went like full betrayal mode. Like, to them, it was a very easy line of thinking where it was, like they just thought the grass was greener on the other side. In short, they thought they could do everything that I can do. And they weren't there yet. And, they pulled the trigger. And then I've had a number of leads in those situations that have come back to me after the fact. And the same thing happened where, they apologized. They, recognized that it wasn't, the right thing to do. It wasn't the best move. And the kingdom ended up, kind of crumbling at that point. I had a situation in Infinity Kingdom where I had, we were there for 6-7 months. We were like the number 7 or number 8 kingdom in the game that I and the team there had worked our way up to. And after the first KVK finished, which we didn't not lose. We were going to make it all the way to Final Zone, and the alliances group that we made it to Zone 3 with even said, hey, if you guys want final rewards, you can take them. Like, they offered us to take final objective. And after everything was said and done, a number of the leads there, thought that, in short, they that they could just do better. That, some of the decisions that were made during wartime, right, weren't the best decisions in their mind. And they were essentially rallied kind of a mutiny, if you will, or a coup d'etat. And, it was just a matter of like, for me, when you've done as many products as I have, you could see those things coming a mile away. And, it's one of those things where, you can choose to fight against the current, or you can, start kind of, you can kind of start a public and transparent transition phase and just say like, look, I've done everything I can, but if this is really the direction that the people who are leading alliances want to go, keep in mind, I'm not, I can't control what they do. They're either here for the right reasons and they believe in the project, or they don't. And it was funny because this has actually happened in a number of my projects but in this one particularly, after all that happened, and I transitioned out, and I told everyone, I said, look guys, I'm transitioning out. The leads, don't agree with the way things have been done recently, they feel like they can do a better job. That's totally fine. I don't want to be somewhere that I'm not happy and I'm not having a good time, and that people don't want to work with me to achieve this vision. They want to do their own thing, and I don't want to compromise my integrity, because then if I stayed, I'd just be following along with a different vision that wasn't my own, and wasn't what people signed up for and agreed to in the beginning. So I do my transition out. I hang out for like a week or two. I help them get everything in line. I promote their new Discord server on my server, like all the stuff, right? And some people may not go that far. Some people might just be like, F this, F these guys, they can go do their own thing. And often, I always try and do the best I can during the transition period. And because I want to help out all the players as possible, I want to let them know what their options are, right? If they plan to stay, or they want to move, or they want to migrate, or they want to do a restart, and they want to rejoin my next project, which, often around half of the people in my projects, give or take, usually would. Like if they knew that I was leaving, sometimes the first immediate question is, oh, okay, when's the next project? So I could join. Which usually was, I never just restarted projects. I always, kind of gave it a week or two to just kind of settle down. But in this particular project, in Infinity Kingdom, I think it was in 65 was the one. And after leadership was transitioned over to them, keep in mind, right, it took me and the team 6-7 months to build this kingdom up. They tore it down in 2 months. Like they just sunk. Everything from I think the number one thing I often see for, like, when I see those kinds of like coup d'etat situations or like betrayals that happen for leadership, where it's like, new people or like younger people or whoever it may be, right? They want to be the ones to kind of, have the power. What I often find is that they quickly start to realize how much work actually goes in to doing all of it. And that was something I noticed in a couple projects that I did, where it transitioned out, and then some of those leads from all the projects that had that happen, where they just thought they could do a better job, came back to me, and a similar situation played out, right, where they apologized and they were like, yeah, it wasn't the right thing. It was so much more work than we thought it was going to be. We weren't able to kind of restabilize, even though the way that I do all my projects is that I set all my projects up to be successful, whether I'm there or not. Like that's just the way I build them from day one. So that way, if I'm not there, they still have a structure they can follow. They still have like the blueprint, if you will, and then to a point where now it comes down to their effort, right? How much are you going to put in? How much work are you going to do? And yeah, so it's always interesting, how those things come out. And, oftentimes, I never really even talk about the kingdoms or the projects, because at the end of the day, they're either going to show up and they're going to put the work in, or they're not. And, and I think either every, or if not the majority of projects where that particular situation has happened, they've all basically kind of come up short, right, or failed in that sense, as it pertains to that new management team being able to kind of bring everyone back together, right, and continue thriving. So
You can guide a horse to water, but you can't force it to.
yeah, no, 100%. So anyways, that's my last little story time rant.
Little quick thing. Ultimately, I know I'm not going to achieve it, but I do want to essentially push myself and strive for perfection with this project. I know it's not going to be possible, because you can't make anything perfect. There's always going to be some kind of fuck up. But I'm really, what I want is just the best really. And everybody's going to say that, but I truly do want to be, the best project. I want to, settle here with my account and take it for a while, maybe a year. Um, but I'm not going to be with this project forever. Eventually, I'm going to get bored because ROK late game, to me, isn't like the most engaging thing. I do like the early KVKs a lot. Um, so later down the road, I'll probably do another project. But I want to innovate with this project, and I do want to put a lot of time and effort into it. And I've already put some of my money into it already before the project even started. But is there any way that we could meet again and talk again?
Yeah, I'm like I usually say, and I would tell anyone, as long as I'm available and I don't have anything else going on, I'm always happy to, to sit down and have a conversation.
One of the things that's convenient coming up is we are close to hitting 500 members, which, would be a quarter of our member goal. So I could make a lot of changes to the project and essentially use that member goal as the big announcement, or essentially kind of like the excuse of why all of these changes went out. Just say, with a big milestone come big changes kind of thing. But at the moment, I know that my project isn't perfect. It's not in that state yet. I could ramble on about the excuses on why it's not in that perfect state, but those are excuses whether I can help them or not. If I want to be the leader, then me to make it that way. But I really should get it to that state as fast as possible, because, like you said, you wouldn't open up a store and just say, well, we're working on, being able to sell that product, but you have the label on the shelf saying that you are selling that product.
Yeah, man. No, like I said, I think it's a good way to approach things. So, well, let me let you go though, because again, it is getting pretty late for me.
Yeah, I gotta go to bed too.
But yeah, no, man. Listen, this has been, at least for me, it's been great. Like I said, I'm always happy to sit down and have a like-minded conversation, especially on a familiar or interesting, engaging topic. So. Yeah, man. No, this has been great. So it was obviously nice to meet you, and to hear a little bit more about the project, and to talk some jumper project shop, which I'm always happy to. So yeah, but with that, I'll leave you to it, and I hope you have a good rest of the night.
You too.
All right, man. You take care.